Eat bold with Subway fiery footlong subs. So hot they'll burn the wimp right out of you. Try the new turkey jalapeno melt, a fiery twist on a legendary flavor. And the bold, delicious buffalo chicken, backed by popular demand. Subway. Eat fresh. The BS Report is a free-flowing conversation that occasionally touches on mature subjects.
First of all,
This is the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
it might be cool, I don't know. And if it's not, I don't care.
The BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Bill Simmons works for ESPN. He's also named the sports guy, and he writes a comical sports column. He must be a popular dude.
The BS Report.
It's got a real dirty sound, like a rusty steak knife cutting through a well-aged steak.
Now.
Here's Bill Simmons.
Welcome to the BS Report. Another sunny day here in Southern California. We have quite a guest today. He is the guy who used to run Disney, which owns ESPN, which I guess technically makes him my former boss, although I did not get to meet him until last year. But now, he has a new book out called Working Together, which is a really, really good book about partnerships. He's not on the Subway Fresh Day Hotline because he's in the studio. Michael Eisner, what's happening?
Not much. Thanks for inviting me to your house.
I loved your book.
Thank you.
And
You'd say that anyway, but that's nice.
no, you know what? I'd say it, but I wouldn't make a big fuss about it. You know, I'd say, oh, I loved your book, and then I'd move on and try to deflect from that I didn't read it or I didn't like it.
Right.
I really thought it was interesting. It made me think, like, so it's about partnerships, and you covered your own partnership with Frank Wells, who is no longer with us, along with a few others.
By the way, I once had Jim Brooks, who made Terms of Endearment, the movie, and he sent me the book, and then the next day he gave me a quiz as to whether I'd read it or not.
Yeah.
To see whether he would actually make the movie with Paramount. And if I had, it was my test. So many executives don't read the material.
And had you read it?
Luckily. Not always had I read. I happen to have read that book.
So does this mean you're going to give me a test to see
no,
if I actually
I'm
read
just
it?
saying.
Because I could pass it.
No. I was it popped into my brain a non sequitur having nothing to do with anything. So
I started reading it, and I like to read like 3 or 4 books at the same time, and I'll jump around. I'm like, oh, I'll grab a chapter from this, and I hate reading one book, but yours I read in like one night. So
wow.
It was really easy to read. It was just like it was simple concepts that were just banged home, and I just liked it.
The intent was it was like supposed to be 10 like New Yorker or Vanity Fair essays together making up a book, so you could read it not in one night, but I'm flattered.
I liked it. The first chapter is about... Well, actually, let me ask you this one first. What made you want to write this book?
I've thought about partnerships, a long time, and I've thought about how, independent, non-partner people that we all kind of idolize, and then a lot of them crash and burn. They kind of believe their own stuff. They can't walk past the mirror. They think they get pretty hot stuff, and they get arrogant, and then they believe everything they think, and then they believe lawyers and accountants who say they can do these stupid things, and then they end up getting in trouble or whatever. And I've been lucky to have most of my life partners that I worked with, and you have checks and balances on ethics, you're in the foxhole together, you high-five together when you are failing, when you succeed, when you fail, you kind of black humor, commiserate with each other. And nobody seems to understand how important it is to have a partner, and how many new businesses have partners, and new restaurants, and new technology companies. And I thought, I know a lot about Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett and Bill Gates and his partners. I thought, well, maybe if I explored why they worked, especially starting with my own, that maybe schools and colleges would start teaching that partnerships are a good thing, rather than, we have little kids and we teach them to share and not spit on their brother or sister, not take their toys away, share. By the time we get to 5th grade, it's all about individual achievement, winning at any cost, carrying that ball across the end zone line.
Well, God, sports is like that now. Everything is individual, and the team is kind of dying.
But having been involved in a degree with sports, particularly in sports with a lot of people on a team, as opposed to like basketball where maybe one person does make a dominant difference. without the team, you can't win.
Yeah.
So, and that's true in business, it's true in life, and it's true in ethics. And so I decided I'd follow the 10 most important partnerships that I could think of, and the most interesting.
Well, you didn't get one. You wanted to do the Clintons, right? And they wouldn't do it. So
They
it would've been
wouldn't.
11.
She was running for president. There is a piece on the Clintons on a
Yep.
dinner I had with the Clintons, and Bill Clinton was game. I think Hillary,
Of course he was. He's always game.
He was
When
game.
is he not game?
and I think maybe rightly so, Hillary Clinton wanted to make sure that the public that she wanted to vote for her accepted the fact that she was an independent from her husband,
Yeah.
which I don't think she is,
Yeah.
in a good sense. And I had this dinner that was so amazing with just the four of us, including my wife, which I can tell you about if you want later. And so I spent the entire...
No, that's a good story. You should tell that one.
Well, I spent the entire time writing the book going back to them because
Yeah.
I wanted them so badly in this thing. Because I was running Disney. I was at ABC. I was in New York. You know, I never go out. My wife and I are at home most of the time, and I don't have the courage to call up important people and say, hey, do you want to have dinner?
Right.
But I was in a strange mood, and I called my wife, and I said, why don't we do something interesting tonight instead of just you and I going to a movie? She said, fine. So I said, how about dinner with the Clintons? She said, oh, give me a break.
That's pretty interesting.
She said, give me a break. I said, no, I'm going to call. I'm going to call Cole. He had just gotten out of office.
Yeah.
I knew they lived in New York, at Chappaqua. So I called the office, and they said yes immediately.
Well, you were running Disney. I would hope they said yes. What are they going to
there
do?
are a
Like,
lot
no,
more-
no, thank you.
There are a lot more important people than me, and he's also busy. At any event, can you come up to Chappaqua? Our house is being renovated. We'll go to a restaurant. Well, I grew up in the Summers right near there, so
Yeah.
I wanted to go for that too. So we go. We have this dinner in this restaurant, just the four of us, and it was unbelievable. He had left office kind of under a cloud, having pardoned Mark Rich and all that stuff about the furniture.
Nobody knew what to make of his 8 years. We weren't able to put it in perspective yet.
And she had just been elected. So she was a big deal. She's a star now,
Yeah.
especially in New York State. And the whole dinner was she saying to us, you know, Bill had 32,000 people that showed up in Toronto. Bill had 82,000 in Japan. You know, Bill did this and Bill did that. And it was like I was talking to the cheerleader and she was talking about the injured tailback.
She was like a stage mom.
It was, she was like a girlfriend who was trying to promote her boyfriend,
Pump him up.
who was kind of injured and he couldn't play in the next game.
Gotcha.
And this went on longer and longer. And at one point in the dinner, he said, why do you want me at ABC? And I said, because you're so damn interesting. And she said, that's right. That's why I married him. She's obviously talking about how great he is. But at one point in the dinner, he said, you know, I wouldn't have been elected governor but for Hillary.
Right.
I certainly wouldn't have been elected president. She is my number one advisor. And when finally it turned to the business about why she was married to him and how interesting he was, they were like holding hands. And it wasn't phony. And it was like I was in a drive-in movie theater at 17 years old with my girl in the front and they're in the back, and you don't really want to be there.
And it's like almost uncomfortable.
You're afraid it's going to go too
They're
far.
They're going to keep making out.
I know. And so I saw this relationship. And I know, obviously, I've read about everything else. And it wasn't phony, and it was real.
You
and
bought
it. Was a partnership, and I bought it. And I thought it would help personalize her, humanize them to be in this book.
Yeah.
And her campaign felt that was probably not a good idea.
That's too bad. I think
and
it
they probably
really
didn't trust
interesting.
what
it would have been a really interesting chapter. I thought the most fascinating chapter was the first one because you were so honest about your relationship with Frank Wells and then throughout the book comparing it to some of the other partnerships that you had that didn't work out and trying to figure out why that one worked. And some of the other ones didn't work as well. You were pretty candid, I thought.
Well, Frank was unbelievable. You know, I was invited to go to Disney, and they really wanted us to be equal CEOs.
Yeah.
And I said, I couldn't believe I said it. I couldn't believe it after I said it. I still can't believe it. But I said, you know, I really don't want to do that. I think I should be the sole CEO.
That's not a great idea, by the way. That's like having co-NFL head coaches.
Well, you
or
need,
something.
in the end of the day, you need a boss.
Yeah.
Warren Buffett is the boss. Valentino is the boss. There was a CEO in the chapter, even though they were partners in Home Depot.
I'm the boss of the BS Report.
Exactly. Joe Torre is the boss, even though Don Zimmer was an incredible partner.
Right.
And their 4 World Series wins. But I still said that, and it was still a better situation being co-CEOs than working for the worst boss in America at Gulf and Western.
Yep.
And 2 seconds, Frank said, fine, you be number 1, I'll be number 2. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe somebody was that selfless and thought that would make it work. And he was to me what Charlie Munger is to Warren Buffett, and on, and Don Zimmer was to Joe Torre. And we just had a great time. It was, we liked each other's wives. We were together all the time. When we failed, we had fun failing, and you can understand that. It wasn't the end of the world. When we succeeded, it was beyond anything we could imagine. Everything I said, he was enthusiastic about, to the point that I had to say, Frank, everything can't be right. I know when Sid Bass, who was a big shareholder of the Disney company, was asked, Michael Eisner was the crazy one, right? He was the one with all these insane ideas. Frank Wells was the Rhodes Scholar.
The calming influence, yeah.
And isn't that true? And Sid said, no, they're both crazy. So we weren't, but we were both enthusiastic. And I just saw how that works. And I had a great relationship at Paramount and ABC with Barry Diller. We really offset each other's skills. You tend to do a more honest work when you have somebody checking and balancing you.
Yeah.
I also, by the way, one of the reasons I wrote this book is I went to a conference, and they talked about a longitudinal study that the Atlantic Monthly had exposed on what causes happiness and the good life. And it was a Harvard study, started in 1939, 1940, 1941, one of the classes of Jack Kennedy. And every 5 years, they did physical, emotional tests, psychological tests for 70 years. And what was the determination at the end of 70 years of what makes, in this case, a man, because it was a single-sex school, happy? It wasn't wealth. It wasn't exercise. It wasn't food. It was a sustained, unique relationship for a long period of time, a business or a spousal relationship through good times and bad times. That was number 1. Number 2 was keeping in contact with siblings, which a lot of people don't do and then feel very guilty about. Mm-hmm. And the 3rd was bestowing information on the generation or 2 below you. Huh. So I put the Atlantic Monthly Harvard longitudinal study together with my experience with Barry Diller and Frank Wells and ABC and Disney and so forth. And then I talked to Warren Buffett, and he became my agent. And he said, you got to do this book.
Right.
Charlie Munger does not get enough credit. I love to play the ukulele. I like to be on the cover of Fortune. He doesn't want to be.
Well, when I was reading it, it made me think of the theories that I have about basketball, because I'm convinced that a basketball team can't win unless one guy is the alpha dog and then everybody else falls into place behind him. And if you have 2 guys who want to be the guy, that's when you get into trouble. And, this was a theme that was in the book the whole time, is that with the best kind of partnership, at some point somebody's got to take a back seat, and not just take the back seat, but be okay with it. And once that happens, you're cruising. Now, you mentioned the co-CEO thing earlier. If Frank had wanted to be, I want to be the CEO, then it doesn't work. But he was okay with it. He was, I'm going to be the most awesome number 2 guy ever. And then you're off and running.
And when he was okay with it, I was happy for him to do number 1 things all the time.
Yeah.
Because it was kind of established. The only way you can do and Ronnie Howard and Brian Grazer, who were fantastic
Their chapter in the book.
Right. Producers, A Beautiful Mind, Apollo 13, Parenthood on Television, a lot of stuff, is they talked about it over many, many years to be partners. And finally, Brian, who in the pecking order of Hollywood somehow is not thought to be the earner of a director, for instance.
Yeah.
He said, okay, Ronnie, and Ronnie I grew up with on Happy Days, and so I know him very well. He said, you'll have 60 and I'll have 40. And he said, okay, and he went home, came back the next day and said, Cheryl, my wife says no, 50-50. We have to be 50-50. And that selfless act has kept them equal and partners for all these decades. And the interesting thing is, there are some years where Ronnie directs a big movie and makes much more money for the partnership. And there are other years where Brian has a TV show that Ronnie had nothing to do with and makes more money. And because they're totally equal, it works.
Well, to clarify that story you just told, Ron Howard was getting the 60, but his wife said, no, that can't work. You should take 50 and have 60, which I thought was pretty interesting. And actually it shaped everything that those guys did over the next
and how many
2+
people,
decades.
How many people can do that? Frank Wells did that with me. Ronnie and his wife did that with Brian Grazer. Valentino, if you've seen The Last Emperor, that movie on Valentino, 50 years of a relationship between Valentino and Giancarlo Giamatti. They met, Valentino was going broke in his 20s.
Yeah.
They met at a restaurant, pickup, whatever you want to call it. They went away for the weekend. Valentino invited his new paramour into his company.
Yeah.
They went bankrupt. This guy saved the company and ran the company for 50 years. It's one of the great love stories, business stories of all time.
Right.
And it opens, the movie opens with the getting the Légion d'honneur in France. The president of France is giving it to Valentino. And it's packed. And Giancarlo is in the back, in the clouds, in the shadows. And Valentino has never even really thanked him publicly. And he starts to go on, and he goes on, and the camera keeps going back and forth between the two. And finally he says, and I want to thank the man who made it all happen. And they're like crying. It was like the culmination of a 50-year partnership.
Well, when you do the sequel, which I hope you do, I think one really interesting chapter would be if you had two musicians, because I think musicians kind of fit the format of all the other ones that you did in this book. Because, like, you take a look at something like U2. Bono's the lead guy. Edge is the guitarist. They can't exist without each other. But the Edge is fine taking the back seat. And I think that's when you see bands stay together for a long time. So often that's the dynamic that happens. But something like the Beatles, where both Lennon and McCartney thought, no, I'm actually the best guy. And then it ends up blowing up because they never kind of solved who the alpha dog was. You know what I mean?
I was going to do that. I was going to do Simon Garfunkel.
Simon and Garfunkel would be a great one.
I was going to do Edge and Bono, and I was going to do the Beatles. And I'm pretty friendly with pieces of all this. And it is a definition of a partnership that can last a long time and a partnership that can't. It's interesting. Since the book came out this week, I have more emails recommending partnerships.
Oh, recommending ideas?
That I didn't think of. Oh, I've been a partner for 65 years in the jewelry business.
I was thinking Jordan and Pippen would have been a great chapter, too, because that's a classic alpha dog sidekick, and Pippen actually took real satisfaction over that he was part of making Jordan the greatest player ever. And that's the thing that he took away from his career. I'm glad I was part of that. He wouldn't have done it without me.
I got to a sports chapter on Joe Torre and Don Zimmer because I don't know if it's as much true for females as males, and now maybe I'm in trouble, but you grow up using sports analogies all the time in everything you do, because if you played team sports, as a lot of boys did growing up. So everything that I used to talk about at Paramount and ABC and even at Disney is with a sports analogy, like shoot from the key in basketball. Don't shoot from half court. And if you take enough shots from the key, enough goes in and you win. Meaning, take reasonable movie shots. Don't try to make your year by making a $500 million movie, which some people even still do. Hockey, don't be offsides. Play by the rules. There are rules in sports. There are rules in business. When you go outside the rules, the referees sometimes are not sitting there on the playing field, but they'll get you later. They're at the SEC. They're in the Justice Department. there and wherever. So I use sports analogies all my career to try to lead. And all of a sudden, when I'm working on this book and I'm doing Valentino and I'm doing Angelo Gordon, which is a financial company, and I'm doing Home Depot and a couple of bridge players, I'm thinking, wait a second. I talk my whole life about sports analogies. What are the great partnerships? And I wanted one that went on a long time.
Yeah.
And when I looked into Don Zimmer and what he gave to Joe Torre, and how Joe Torre, neither of them were successful on their own, and how Joe Torre never really had the guts to take the risk. But when he finally trusted Don Zimmer and his playing a little bit shooting from the hip, just instinct, not all those statistics, and you had the man who was a little wilder sitting on the right of Joe Torre,
right.
and Joe Torre
his id,
accepting it and doing things where he wouldn't have done a hit and run, or he wouldn't have done a bunt, or he would have not played in the fifth game of the 1996 fifth game of the World Series, where he played, what was the guy's name? Paul O'Neill.
Yeah,
because he batted.
He's banged up.
And he was banged up, and he was a right-handed going against a left-handed pitcher, and he said, "You're not going to play." And then Zimmer, when he walked out of the room, said, "You ought to play him."
Yeah, he's been busting his butt. He's been playing hurt all year.
And they won the game, and they won the World Series, the first of four. So that story on Don and Joe Torre, I've lived twice. When I worked for Diller at Paramount and at ABC, I was the shooting from the hip, and Barry was
younger.
Barry was the conservative, the boss.
Yep.
I was second. And so he was always careful, and I was always saying, "Barry, come on, let's do it." And we came to having never lost money on one movie in that entire 8 years. When I went to Disney, the buck stopped with me. I started getting nervous about being too nuts.
Yeah.
And Frank was the crazy one. Everybody thinks it was the opposite. So the Torre-Zimmer analogy is so prevalent in my career that I used it.
The other thing, one of the other points that kept getting banged home in the book was the people who are in the partnerships keep making the point, it's better to have two people than one. You have everything covered. You have checks and balances. It's a competitive advantage if it's pulled off correctly.
Was Melinda Gates said, smarter, faster.
Yeah.
That was her analysis of her relationship with Bill Gates and their foundation.
Yeah.
Was we're smarter, faster, plus everything else that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
They're so smart, the two of them, that, it's scary. But they augment each other's intelligence, and they check each other's, way of doing things, and they also have children and all the rest.
Who was the one that had the quote about, why would you want to have it all for yourself? Like only an a-hole would want to have all of it for himself and not share it with anybody. Somebody said that. I can't remember.
Probably Warren.
Yeah, I think it was either Warren or Charlie, one of those.
Yeah,
guys.
well, they were on. Yeah. Everything they say is like in a couplet. I mean, you could write a book and just spend a few hours with them. I mean, we're talking about the one thing you can't have against your partner is envy or jealousy.
Yeah.
You have to be selfless as to your partner, and that's something you learn, and you're in it together.
Well, that's what Warren Buffett said to you when you were going to hire Mike Ovitz to replace in the Frank Wells spot, and he's like, it's not going to work.
Right.
You guys are both going to want. How did he put it?
Well, he said he thinks he said it to me before I started with him. I believe he told it to me after we did it, but I'm going to let him have his way, because whichever. And he said, like Charlie and me, I love the spotlight, I love the banjo, I love being on the covers of this and that. Charlie doesn't. He said, you like it like I like it, Michael. Yeah. I think Michael Ovitz is the same as you and me, and also whatever else problems you may have, and it ain't going to work. But what he said about envy, and not to envy somebody, is, think about the 7 deadly sins. He said, it's interesting. He said, gluttony, God, I love gluttony. I mean, gluttony is fine until later in the day when you feel guilty about gaining weight. He said, lust, that can be fun. Yeah. Of course, you get in a lot of trouble if you're not in control. He said, envy, it makes you sick the moment you have it. You're sick during it, and you're sick at the end of it. Envy gets you nowhere.
Wasted energy.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I thought Torrey had an interesting quote. He didn't elaborate, but it was clear it had happened to him at least once, where he said one of the reasons he wanted Zimmer as a bench manager was because he never had to look over his shoulder and worry that that he was angling for his job, and that every suggestion that he made was an honorable one and not. I think that happens in baseball and football and basketball sometimes, where you have an assistant coach who's also on the way up and would, obviously doesn't want to get you fired, but at the same time, if you get fired, yeah, I'll take the job. That sounds fantastic. And he felt comfortable with Zimmer because he knew that would never happen.
Yeah, it's a really double-edged sword, and it's a really big part of business and everything else. A lot of weak CEOs, or forget it, CEOs who are nervous or insecure want very weak people working for them because they don't jeopardize their job. And that's a cauldron for failure.
Well, then you're surrounded by yes men, which is the worst possible thing that could happen.
Then there's the other kind, which I really adhere to, which is the stronger the people are below you, the better they make you look. And you have to know at some point one of them is going to try to stab you in the back. But it's worth it to have that kind of quality. What was great about these partnerships is even though some of these partners could in fact take over from the other person, they really liked that person so much or were so much on the team that Joe Torre, in his particular case, had, first of all, Don Zimmer was older. He probably wasn't going to get another manager's job. He made it clear he didn't want Joe's job. Joe did not think he could do Joe's job because dealing with Steinbrenner, you have to have come out of a family where the father was impossible and you learned how to deal. And he did. He came out of a family where he was the youngest and the father was abusive. And he learned how to juggle a difficult person.
Yeah.
So he could say yes to Steinbrenner and all Steinbrenner's insane ideas, and just Steinbrenner would forget about it. He'd go on. He knew Zimmer couldn't do it. And actually, when Joe had a prostate operation and was out for spring training and part of the season, Zimmer completely failed in dealing with Steinbrenner.
Yep.
Because he got annoyed when Steinbrenner called. And eventually, when Steinbrenner, who knew he couldn't criticize Joe because Joe had won all these World Series, so he criticized all the bench coaches, the bench coach and the other coaches, Zimmer couldn't take it.
Right.
So here you had a partnership where Zimmer was right as number two and Joe was right as number one. Their personalities melded in such a way that they could create, if they had the horses, which they did in Jeter and all the rest of those young players at that time, they soared.
I thought you were really candid about, the course of your career and all the different partnerships you had. The one that I didn't feel like you totally went into, and I'm curious why, is with Jeffrey Katzenberg, because that was somebody that you were close with for a while, and then it went in different directions. Did you think about putting that in the book, and why didn't you?
Well, I didn't want to put in the book either the Michael Ovitz or the Jeff Katzenberg, but I felt I had to, so I did to a degree. And Michael Ovitz, I just described to you, pretty much what was in the book. Jeffrey Katzenberg was an excellent partner, both for my 8 years at Paramount. He was my partner there in working on films for about 3 or 4 years, and then for a decade at Disney, and did a fantastic job. And when Frank Wells died, I did not think he was the right person to take over the entire Walt Disney Company. And I wanted him to relax, give me space, give me a couple of years, maybe even to have.
Was it because you worried that he was the right partner for you, or that it just wasn't going to work?
I didn't think he had enough information or knowledge or sophistication in the non-movie parts of the business.
Right.
I knew he could learn it.
Because he was pretty young.
He was young and very aggressive. He'd have 3 dinners and 4 lunches. I mean, he was unbelievable. Fabulous executive. And I had also come off a serious operation, and he was putting a lot of pressure on me to get that job right away. And when the Disney family found out about that, they told me, because they thought he was a little immature at that moment, if you do it, we will all leave the board.
Oh.
So on one hand, I had the family not wanting him. On the other hand, I wanted him, but not then. And frankly, it was his time to move on and find a new partner, which he found in Steven Spielberg and David Geffen. And I found eventually in Bob Iger. So it worked out great for all of us. We had a little bit of a misunderstanding about a contract.
Yeah.
I, like a fool, became entrenched in my own ego and thoughts and let it get out of control.
Yeah.
Because I keep forgetting how interested the media is in this particular field of business.
Right.
If it was anything else. By the way, the year that Michael Ovis and I played out our opera in the front page of a few newspapers, there were 187 other presidents and CEOs that separated that nobody even reported on.
Yeah.
But
hey,
Disney. Yeah. The partnership that did break apart because of death was Steve Rubel and Ian Schrager in Studio 54, which actually is, to me, not the most interesting partnership, but the most interesting cultural experience I lived through, because I was working in New York. The war ended, Vietnam ended in 1975. It tore the country apart. Simultaneously with the war, the drug culture started to grow. And simultaneously with that, birth control took over before AIDS.
A few years before AIDS.
Right. So now you have birth control, war protesting, drugs. And you have these two kids from Brooklyn who go to Syracuse and meet. One very much like all the other partners. Steve Rubel, a front man, out there, bon vivant, letting people into his club, denying people into his club, and you have Ian kind of running the day-to-day. And they got carried away with the momentum. And the momentum was uncontrollable.
They're renegades. Yeah, they got swept up in it a little bit.
I was only in that club twice.
Yeah.
And I had just moved to California, and I'm on the payphone in the back calling my wife at the end of the day, and I'm saying to her, Jane, you will not believe what I'm seeing on the stair landing there and on the stair landing there. It was just out of control. And they were out of control, and they got in trouble.
They went to jail.
They went to jail because of tax evasion and stuff like that. They went to jail as partners. They stayed in jail as partners. They understood their mistake. They understood the momentum that carried them to the abyss. And in jail, they created the second cultural phenomena that I've seen, this time in the hotel business.
Boutique hotels.
Boutique hotels. And then Steve Rubel tragically dies of AIDS. And so that whole cultural moment of the 70s, and I'm doing Happy Days, which is going back to the 50s on television, and everybody is happy to watch kind of, hi, Mom, hi, Dad, when's the soccer game?
Yeah.
And I'm living and seeing the Plato retreats, which are what they were, and Studio 54, and Vietnam, and Kent State, and these two guys. So I've lived through a lot of these partnerships that I've written about, mostly from a distance, but they've all kind of happened during my career. And the most successful in each area in investing, obviously Munger and Buffett, in Wall Street, Angelo and Gordon, in baseball, Torrey and Zimmer, in Studio 54, the guys we were just talking about. I've even looked at two bridge players who've been together for 50 years.
Yeah, that was interesting.
And there you have to be partners. And still, there are very few that have been partners for as long as these two guys.
Well, I don't want to spoil the whole book because I want people to read it. So go get the book. It's called Working Together. Since we have you here, I don't think people realize, now people in my age range, like 36 to 45, I don't think people realize what an impact you had on our pop culture experiences. And I didn't realize it until we went to dinner once, and you were like, oh, yeah, I was involved with that. Oh, yeah. And I was like, oh, my God, all these projects defined my youth, basically.
Well, Multiplication Rock. Did you ever watch that? 3 is the magic number. all the stuff.
Oh, the Saturdays?
Yes.
You did that too?
I did.
Oh, my God.
I mean,
it was like you were my dad.
No, I'm not
didn't even
trying
know
to
it.
add to what I did. I just happen to be, the guy in the office at ABC where a guy walks in with a guitar, and I was running children's programming. He said, should we teach kids how to multiply and how to add? And we can call it. And I said, well, yeah, how about 90 seconds? And he played 3 as a magic number, and then a year later he came in and played Conjunction Junction.
Oh, yeah. I make my kids watch these. We have the Schoolhouse Rock DVDs.
Right.
Yeah, they're fantastic. So you were at Paramount, and just like, I don't mean to stroke your ego here, but just list some of the shows that you were involved with, because I don't think people
the TV shows.
People know you from the Disney thing, and they don't realize that you were on the ground floor of.
We had a good run. Barry Diller and I had a good run.
A good run. It was.
We had 5 of the
ridiculous.
top. We had 5 of the top television shows, and we had either number 1 or number 2 in movies.
But say some of their shows though.
Well, the movies or shows?
TV shows first.
TV shows: Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley, Barney Miller, Cheers. I don't know. A lot of others I can't think of right now. Mork and Mindy.
I should have written
Brady
it down.
Bunch, Love American Style.
You did Brady Bunch?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I mean, that was like, for my generation, the number one defining, because they would run it every day at 4 in the afternoon. And that's how I learned all my lessons about life.
Love American Style.
Yeah.
Mission Impossible. That stuff.
So then when did you transition over to start doing movies?
Well, we were doing movies right away. The first, I arrived in, I arrived at 76. And that Christmas we had Cheek and Chong, Up in Smoke. I think that was the thing.
Very important stoner movie.
And by the next summer, Bad News Bears, Foul Play. Then that Christmas we had...
Did you make Chevy Chase leave Saturday Night Live? Was that your fault? It was kind of your fault. It was a little bit your fault.
No, his first movie was Foul Play.
Yeah,
no,
you signed him to Foul Play, so I blame you.
No, you can blame me on Eddie Murphy. Because Eddie Murphy we brought over to do... first one was...
First one was 48 Hours.
48 Hours, and then the Prince and the Pauper movie.
Trading Places.
Beverly Hills Cop.
Did you make him do Best Defense, or was that somebody else?
That was somebody else.
They gave him like $1 million for 15 minutes?
That was somebody else.
That was where Eddie... I have a theory that every star gets one crap movie that it doesn't even matter what it is, but people are so fired up about them, they'll go see it. Like for Julia Roberts, it was Sleeping the Enemy. Doesn't matter what they released.
Well, John Travolta, we did...
Moment by Moment? Yeah.
We didn't do it. We did at ABC, Cotter, Barbarino.
Yeah, we forgot Cotter.
Right, I forgot Cotter, right. There's a whole group, I forgot Cotter. So out of Cotter, John did The Boy in the Plastic Bubble for television.
Which, by the way, was, in my opinion, the greatest TV movie of that entire mid-'70s, and I'll never forget when he got out of the bubble.
Brian's song, too.
Oh, I forgot Brian's song was a TV movie. Okay, my number 2 TV movie ever. And number 3 was the one with the hitchhikers, when the guy was killing the hitchhikers in the van, which was an ABC one.
Right.
You probably remember
Steven
that one.
Spielberg's
Duel was good, too. Boy in the Plastic Bubble. Who could forget when he got out of the bubble, though?
Right.
Anyone who's between 35 and 44 remembers when he got out of the bubble.
So we went from that, and then we went into Saturday Night Fever.
Which
John
was
did.
your thing.
Yes. Yeah. Based on a story called Tribal Rights of a Saturday Night.
Tell why. If you've ever watched Saturday Night Fever, which I still think is one of like the 12 greatest films of all time, just because, not just it was great when it came out and it was so dominant culture and all that stuff, but it's still a good movie if you watch it now.
It's a great movie.
It holds up. Like my daughter's not quite old enough to watch it yet, but I feel like she would enjoy it. But tell why the one gaping hole at Saturday Night Fever is the lead actress, who's horrible, Carolyn Gorney, never seen again, and why was she cast?
Oh, the whole thing was so complicated.
It wasn't complicated.
I learned
the story.
I learned from that. I had just started the movie business. We changed directors the day before we were supposed to shoot.
You went with the guy who did Rocky, right? Or you fired the guy who did Rocky? John Avildsen?
We fired him and John Badham did.
That's what it was. Okay.
And we're talking about the co-star, and he recommends this woman, and I just assumed we had such discussions, problems in changing director, getting John to do this movie.
So you don't want to be a jerk.
I figured I'd go with a director.
Yeah. All right, I trust you.
So I went with the director, and which is what you usually should do, by the way. Directors usually are fine.
Yeah.
So we're in those days, we used to do previews outside of L.A. So I went one night to Cincinnati and one night to Cleveland for a preview. And I didn't even know what we had, except there was a lot of dirty language in it. And I didn't even know it was a musical, really. To me, it was a story about this kid who leaves Brooklyn and leaves his friends behind to work in the paint shop.
Yeah.
Moves to New York. And I thought I did it again in Cocktail. I've done it about 8 times, that movie. But Saturday Night
I loved Cocktail.
Well, that was the same thing. It was all about the guy who gives up the life of ease and
the underdog
and studies, becomes intelligent. I did a movie called The Warriors. You remember the Warriors movies?
It's only one of my 10 favorite movies ever.
Well, The Warriors was...
Well, hold on. You got to finish Saturday Night Fever.
Oh, all right. Where was I? Oh, so...
Carolyn Gorney.
Right. So we preview it in Cincinnati, and the audience walks out in the middle of it. They're absolutely... They just walk out. And I'm having an argument that I think it's because of the language. And not the language when you see the people's mouths moving, but the off-screen language. Every time John would be talking to somebody, you'd hear coming from the side speakers every profanity.
Yeah.
So I was talking to the director outside his room down a long hall at a motel about the language. And out walks Carolyn Gorney.
The lead of the movie.
And I go back to my room and I call Barry up and I said, Barry, let's approve the co-stars of our movies from now on. Because I have a feeling there was another motive here. And I still have no proof, by the way. She may have been in there taking dictation. I don't know.
I think your proof is her performance in the movie.
She didn't do it. Some of the dancing we had to augment. We had to augment all the dancing.
She couldn't dance. She couldn't act. And you probably could have gone cuter, I'll be honest, for the mid-70s.
Well, because of her, the chairman of Gulf and Western would say to Barry Dillon, now this was a giant movie, by the way.
Yeah.
He would say, you guys don't know how to pick pretty women. You don't know. You guys have no taste.
Yeah.
All you in Hollywood creeps, you don't know nothing. So I got so tired of hearing him say that. I said, Barry, we're going to make a movie. It's just about beautiful women. And just leave me alone.
What was the movie?
So guy comes, Don Simpson, who was a legendary person that worked for me, comes in and says, there's this bar in Toronto where they do a thing called flash dancing. And these beautiful models get on top of a bar, and then they pour water on them, and they dance. And I said, fine, let's do a movie. But she really wants to be a ballet star. You see, there's a theme here with me.
Yeah.
She really wants to do something, but she's doing this flash dancing to earn money to become a ballet star. So we have, in casting her, the woman to play this part, I brought in, I would say, 120 men into a screening room. A lot. Drivers, messengers, everybody. I stood up at the beginning and I said, now I want you to sit here. We have 8 women we've tested for this movie. This is not about performance. I don't want to hear about performance.
Yeah.
I want to know which of those women, of those 8, you would like to go away with. I don't want any other information.
This is genius. I love this.
Because I was trying to make Charlie Bluthorn happy.
You tapped into...
So there were 2 finalists. One was the woman who was the blonde who was on the bar and the water came down. I can't remember her name. Casey somebody. And then there was our lead. And they were the 2 finalists. And I found out that the other woman was at Princeton, an African American. And I thought, now that's interesting. This is whatever year it was. She was beautiful. She was a Princeton graduate.
Jennifer Beals, you're talking about. Yeah.
And she was flash dancing. So we cast her. She couldn't do all the dancing either.
You had the famous body double who got a nice little run out of that she was the body double.
We had a lot of people that did it.
Yeah.
And the last scene after it was over, because the whole thing in the rough cut was almost uncuttable. We almost couldn't make a movie out of it. So we had to shoot something more. So we went to Hollywood Boulevard, or maybe it was Broadway in New York, I can't remember, found a kid street dancing. Those kids in that days, and they would go in their back and they'd go around.
Right.
And we put him in a dress, and he's the one in the last scene.
Wow. So when you guys did Saturday Night Fever, tell the story about how you own the Bee Gees song, or the Bee Gees songs came out before the movie. That never happened before. Because you were one of the first ones who realized that music and movies could actually go hand in hand.
By accident, I didn't realize it. I thought we were doing...
Well, you realized it after the fact.
Well, I was walking down... First, I was walking down Central Park West, and Robert Stigwood, who was the producer, who was also the manager of the Bee Gees, said to me, do you want to hear the music? Oh, yeah, I guess there's music in this movie. Okay. I go up to his apartment. He plays the Bee Gees music. All I want to do is get out of there and go have dinner.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Sounds great. Fine. Sounds good. That was it. It's moving along, and I'm told that the music is going to come out before the movie. Barry and I are working. That's unusual, because usually record companies don't want to do that. They want the movie and the marketing of the movie to set up the music. And Robert, because he represented the Bee Gees, got himself in a situation with a record company that had to come out 3 weeks in advance, which I thought would kill it.
Yep.
I'm skiing in Vail over Christmas, and I'm at the bottom of the hill, and a guy who helps you get on the chairlift has a transistor radio, and I hear Staying Alive. Oh, isn't that interesting? The music must be out. Then I get to the top, and the guy who helps you off the lift, little thing playing Staying Alive. And then I go in to get lunch, and Staying Alive. And I go to the payphone, pre-cell phones, say, Barry, something's going on here. And from that moment on, it was a cultural change across the world. John Travolta became Valentino, not the Valentino.
Yeah, the modern day Valentino.
Right.
Yeah.
He became the old Valentino. Although he became the contemporary, the movie star.
Right.
Beyond anything I'd seen. Bigger than Michael.
And he was already a star. It's not like he was not a star at the time. He was on Cotter.
No, not like he wasn't.
He was on Cotter, though.
He was on television. Yes, yeah. But he wasn't even the star of Cotter. He became the
cheesecake guy,
the Fonzie of Happy Days for Cotter.
Yeah.
But this was different. I went around the world with him. This was scary. This was more than Michael Jackson.
Right.
This was unbelievable, and it was that opening main title with the feet walking down playing.
It still holds up too.
Right.
33 years later or whatever. Right. And then he did Grease. You didn't do Grease though.
Yes.
Oh, you did Grease.
Oh yeah.
After Grease, that's when he was at a level that was.
Yeah, and then we
crazy.
I did a lot of movies with him. I did movies at Disney as well. Phenomena, Pulp Fiction.
Oh, during his comeback stage.
Yeah, I wasn't there for Guess Who's Talking or whatever the movie was.
Talking Babies.
Talking Babies that really relaunched him. I have a fairly close, I'm a good friend of John's because we really, I didn't think, by the way, he was going to be the one that broke out of Cotter. We cast Cotter.
You thought it was going to be Robert Hedges?
No, Epstein. Who played Epstein?
Robert Hedges.
Oh, right. I thought it was that guy. We cast everybody, and we're all sitting around, and to me, the Epstein guy's going to be the big star.
Yeah, watch out for him. Watch out for Epstein.
Right. You never know. For sure.
What about Charlie's Angels? Were you overseeing that one when Farrah Fawcett had to leave? And
I was at. Oh, you don't want to hear this. I was at ABC.
I do want to hear this story.
I haven't told this story ever, I think. I'm at ABC running programming. And neither Barry Diller nor I were major fans of the kinds of programming that Aaron Spelling did. But Aaron Spelling was best friends with the president of the network.
Fred Silverman.
No, Elton Rule.
Oh.
Way before Fred Silverman came. And one day, a friend of mine calls me up and says, "You're being fired." I said, "What do you mean I'm being fired?" "You're being fired because you don't call back Aaron on the phone enough, and you don't respect him, and you don't call back his partner." I said, "I'm not being fired." He said, "Yes, you are." So I went and had lunch with Aaron's business manager. He said, "Yeah, we're getting you fired. We're going to get you fired. You're over." I said, "Really?" So I went back to Barry. I said, "Barry, you know what? I just had my second child. I don't want to be fired. I'm just going to say yes to everything they do. I know it's programming beneath you. It's not, it's not some of the other great stuff we had done, Roots and Rich Man, Poor Man, and whatever." He said, "Leave me alone. I don't know what you're doing." So from then on, everything that Aaron Spelling presented, I loved. Unbelievably. I just thought it was the greatest.
So it's Charlie's Angels.
Well, first of all, I sent him the articles on Starsky and Hutch instead of anybody else. I thought that would ingratiate him to me, that I gave him two characters from the Newark police that I liked.
Yeah.
And that he'd make so he made a hit show. Then he comes in with...
so you helped him create Starsky and Hutch.
Yeah, well, I gave it to him instead of like Quinn Martin or somebody else.
Smart.
I wanted my job.
Yeah. You didn't tell him to use the cool car, did you? Did he come up with that, or did you come up with that?
No, I'm sure he came up with that.
It's a nice car.
I just gave him the article from the Newark Advocate, I guess it's called.
Were those the real names of the cops?
No.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I don't...
Those are great names.
No,
Whoever
maybe,
came up with Starsky
maybe
and Hutch,
they were. They may have been.
I almost don't think anybody's good enough to come up with those names.
So then he comes in with Love Boat. This is something I hardly could even say the words. But I said, great. I say to Barry, we're going to do Love Boat. What could I say?
Yeah. And who knew it was going to...
Giant hit.
Yeah.
Then he comes up with Charlie's Angels. So my desire to keep a job helped
led to...
by just letting it happen. That is not the usual way.
I came home from triple overtime, Game 5 of the 1976 NBA Finals with my dad, and it started at 9 at night, and it went till 1, and we came home at 1:30, and I'd never been up that late, and we were so wired we couldn't sleep, put on TV, and it was like the 5th episode of Charlie's Angels. They were rerunning it at night, and there were these hot female detectives running around, and I was like, is this what happens late at night? This is awesome. That was it. I was a night out after that.
First time females ever had been sole stars of a primetime television.
So then Lee Majors, The $6 Million Man, another one of my favorite shows.
Yeah, we did that.
Married to Farrah Fawcett.
Right.
And she decides she needs to leave the show because Lee needs a stay-at-home wife, and not somebody who's working all the time. This actually happened. She was probably the biggest female TV star at the time. Left the show so she could make dinner for her husband every night. Needless to say, that marriage didn't last.
Maybe she wasn't a good cook.
Not a good partnership.
Maybe not a good cook.
Or not a good cook. Tell the Eddie Murphy thing.
About Saturday Night Fever? I mean, about Beverly Hills Cop?
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
This is your best story. I think this is your number one story.
I'm like...
I don't know, you're like... it's like Eisner karaoke.
Embarrassing.
No, this is a great story.
Let's see.
There's no way people aren't enjoying these stories. I refuse to believe it.
So I got this job. Actually, I got the job with Barry because he left ABC 2 years before I did, and then he called me to see if I would follow him to Paramount. And I was at the 76 Olympics in Montreal.
Right.
While Bruce Jenner was running around with a flag, I was on a payphone and saw nothing of it. To make my deal with Barry. So in the conversation with him, he said, what kind of car do you want? And I said, what do you mean? You got a car? I never got a car. He said, yeah, you got a car. What do you want? I said, what do you have? He said, I have a Mercedes. I said, oh, great, I'll have a Mercedes. I could care less about a Mercedes. So the first day at work, I get in my new car, and I drive from where I lived in West Los Angeles to Paramount, which is downtown, through Beverly Hills. Put the radio on full blast, put the top down, and I'm going probably 40 miles over the speed limit, and I get stopped. And a cop throws me violently in the back of the car because I am like hair everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, he could care less. And I'm sitting there and I'm seeing all these gadgets. Now, this is 76.
Yeah.
So they had stuff that I'd never seen before, other than guns. You know, they seemed to have computers, and they had, like, walkie-talkies and all this stuff. He comes back, and I start saying, this car is unbelievable. And I start talking to the cop. And before I'm finished, I'm interviewing him. And I said, do you live here? He said, no, none of the cops can afford to live in Beverly Hills. We live in Orange County. We live in the Valley.
This doesn't surprise me because you're a pretty curious guy in general.
Well, I was
also surprised that you would interview a police officer.
I was also
getting arrested,
trying to get out of my ticket, and he finally let me go. We got a call, a bank robbery or something. He said, "Get out of here! Get out of here!" So I drive to. First day, I hadn't even been on the Paramount lot. I walk in, I meet all the people, and I say, "We have to do a movie about Beverly Hills Cops. They can't afford to live there. They're protecting the wealthy. They feel entitled. They're like palace guards. They're interesting." And so we wrote I don't know, 6, 7, 8 scripts. We never got it right. We finally got it right.
But you left out a
No, I'm getting there.
Okay.
I'm getting there.
All right, sorry.
And we went to Stallone to be.
This is a great what if for movies.
The star.
Yeah. What a what if this is.
He said yes, made a deal. He took the script home, which we finally got after 5 years, and he rewrote it. And it no longer was Beverly Hills Cop. It actually turned into what he did years later, a movie called First Blood, which was his version of it was a whole series of movies that he made. The first one was called First Blood.
He turned Beverly Hills Cop into First Blood? How is that even possible?
Well, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
So I went to see him.
So he basically killed off Beverly Hills Cop and just gave you First Blood.
Right. So
yeah.
I went to see him, and I never done this before. He was a giant star of
yeah.
rock. I said, Sly or Mr. Stallone or whatever I called him, we can't do this. I've worked too many years on getting the script what we want. Let's do something else or whatever. And he couldn't have been nicer. Okay, I just don't want to do what you gave me. And Jeffrey Katzenberg was in the other room. We had made a deal off Saturday Night Live with Eddie Murphy. And he said, we got a movie, because I had told Jeffrey.
So this is probably like 1981, because First Blood came out the next year, and the Eddie Murphy deal started the next year.
Okay.
I'm going to say 1981.
Okay.
Okay.
So Jeffrey and I, of course, were talking about this all the time. He kind of, like a partner, gave me the courage to go fire Sly. He wouldn't go do it, but he gave me the courage to go do it.
We should do this, but you go do it.
Yeah, exactly. And then he was left there with a meeting a couple of hours later with Eddie Murphy. And he says to Eddie Murphy, do you want to be in Beverly Hills Cop? And Eddie says, can I carry a gun? And Jeffrey said, yes. He said, okay, I'll do it.
And so there it was.
There it was. That's how it all came together.
How did 48 Hours happen? Didn't they try to fire Eddie Murphy from 48 Hours? I thought they saw a daily of one of the first scenes, and they were like, oh, my God, what is going on here?
No, it wasn't.
That's not true?
It wasn't they. It was me.
It was you?
Yes.
You almost fired my favorite actor from my number one favorite movie of all time.
Neither.
Okay.
The director, whose name is, who also directed
Walter Hill.
Walter Hill, Warriors.
And Streets of Fire.
Right. That we didn't do.
Okay.
We wrote the script, and Larry Gordon, who is this great producer, he is the only Jew from Mississippi that probably exists, from Belzona, Mississippi. Fantastic guy. He's producing it, and he's produced a lot of very successful stuff. And the first scene is shot, and it's Eddie Murphy.
It's the Torchy scene.
In the bar.
Yeah.
With all these rednecks.
One of the great movie scenes of all time.
Not what we shot the first time. And it was like tame. And Walter and everybody was trying to be respectful and not do shticky African-American black stuff.
Yeah.
And all that stuff that were made in the 40s with a black guy. And Larry, he blames me 100%. I'm still getting blamed in this conversation. He calls Walter Hill up and says, it was his note that we weren't getting what we were supposed to get.
Yeah.
Walter, Michael saw the dailies, and there's no tension. There's no comedy about this black man walking into this bar of rednecks. And they reshot it the next day and got the scene that you're talking about. And for some reason, what's followed me ever since is somehow we were thinking about firing some people. We weren't. Nick Nolte and Eddie Murphy were great together.
Unbelievable.
We just shot one day where we missed. It was supposed to be the Defiant Ones.
Yeah.
Tony Curtis and Sidney Poitier.
It's the only movie that if they ever remake it, I'm going to kill everybody and serve the mandatory prisons. Like if I catch wind that they're going to remake that movie, I will kill everybody involved and I'll serve the prison sentence.
They shouldn't.
And The Warriors was another one that when you guys did that. Now that was
Larry Gordon.
That was pretty controversial, though, when that came out, because they were like, oh, gangs are going to come see it in the theater, and there's going to be gang violence after. I remember it was like there were headlines and stuff.
I remember the meeting. It was horrible. Made the movie. I still call Walter Hill Walter Warrior Hill.
Well, one of the most inventive action movies of all time. And whoever thought of that idea should just go to the Hall of Fame of great ideas.
I think it was Walter. It may have been Larry. We made the movie. I made them put a scene in it, the same scene we talked about and everything we talked about, in the subway where they're talking about getting out of the gang and going to college and all that stuff, they still, Larry and Walter said, what is that scene doing there? I said, well, I don't want them to be such horrible people.
That's my thing. We have to have it in.
We have to have something where they look like they're redeemable. What happened was the first day in line going to the movie, there was a murder.
Wasn't it in Boston?
I don't remember. There was a murder, and we overreacted, and we literally pulled it from the theaters. It only played for about 3 days. Pauline Kael said it was one of the best, as a reviewer of the New Yorker, one of the best movies ever made. But I'll tell you, 4 years later, I'm in a meeting with Ted Turner. This is like stream of consciousness here.
See, I knew you'd like podcasts. This is great. You'd love this.
I'm with Barry Diller and Ted Turner at Barry's house. And Ted Turner is ranting and raving about Hollywood and the depravity of Hollywood and how horrible we all are and making trash. And The Warriors is a perfect example of it. And he's standing on Barry Diller's antique tables, ruining it, going crazy. And I said, Ted, have you ever seen it? He said, oh, no, I haven't seen it. Why would I see it? I just know it was awful. That night I saw him at a function where he was acting out what he was criticizing.
So it never went back to the theater after the third day?
Not really. It went on television.
Thank God for cable.
Yeah, it was. We got so scared of the people, of the kinds of people who were coming to the theater waiting in line, that we just decided it wasn't worth it.
That's amazing. I didn't know that.
And we knew what we'd seen later in video and all other places, and we lost a lot of money by doing that. We made enough. We made it back on the movie because of the strength of the movie, but we may have distributed it differently, but we never wanted people waiting in line to see
Well, even 30 years later, they're still screwing it up because it has the worst Blu-ray I think that's ever been made. They did some weird director's cut with comic book cuts. All people who love the Warriors, like myself, we just want the full movie that has the 3 scenes that got cut that will sometimes show up in the TV version. And that's it. Just give us the director's cut of what we want to see. Don't add stuff.
Aren't they remaking it? I think they're remaking. I know they're remaking.
I don't know how you remake it in the cell phone era. Because in 2010 they're just like, hey, what's going on? They text somebody. That's it. You know, I wish I had known you when you were still making giant movie decisions, because I could have told you my story.
Which is?
About a struggling bartender who dreamt of becoming a sports columnist and podcast host.
Perfect.
And had the dream. And even as he's making drinks and scrubbing the bar, he's thinking, someday I might be able to get out of this. You would have want that sight unseen.
Well, you'd have to have, first of all, some kind of major issue like a drug problem, or you were thrown out for cheating. You have to have some other side of it that you could redeem yourself from.
Oh, that's interesting. Like maybe I had like some sort of journalism scandal when I had my one chance.
Plagiarism.
I plagiarized.
Perfect.
It wasn't my fault. I got framed.
Perfect.
The guy who was yeah.
Perfect.
And all I want to do is write again, and I can't. Nobody will hire me.
Exactly.
That would have worked.
Current day blacklisting.
Cocktail was a good movie. I'll defend Cocktail.
I like Cocktail.
I wrote a whole column once about all the lessons I learned from Cocktail from Coughlin, the bartender.
How to make certain kind of drinks?
Just about his lessons on life. Like everything must end badly or else it wouldn't end. But that was a good one. I've used that in columns.
How about Pretty Woman?
Were you that was yours?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that was Katzenberg's greatest idea ever, right? I mean, because the Pretty Woman script was pretty dark, and he reinvented it as almost a fairy tale, I thought. Well,
what happened was, yes, Gary Marshall, or somebody showed us a script called 300. It was disgusting. And my conversation with Gary Marshall and Jeffrey was, I want the only virgin prostitute that ever existed. This is a virgin. I want to think of her as a virgin, and think of Some Came Running with Shirley MacLaine. This is the woman with a heart of gold. She's only doing this so she can go become a brain surgeon at MIT.
It's only been a couple weeks. She just started. She's only had a couple.
She's really never, and especially in the era that we were dealing in.
HIV. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So we were very, And, of course, that movie and Officer and a Gentleman had different endings.
Officer and a Gentleman had a different ending?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we did two endings, or both of them. Officer and a Gentleman, this goes back. God, these are all the Paramount movies.
Well, Pretty Woman had the bad ending where they break up and that's it.
They had the same ending.
Yeah.
Neither of the endings that we ended up with I believed in. So in Pretty Woman, I said, he's not going to go off with this woman. Just end it where they separate. And we tested both, and I was completely wrong. And in Pretty Woman, I said, you know what? He should drive by. She's on the balcony, and they should kind of not really come together. Yeah. And we shot them that way, and we shot them coming together, and it was a completely different result.
So you've caught some people, and we have to go soon because I've already kept you long enough, but you've caught some people at some pretty big apexes, like Travolta we mentioned, Julia Roberts. After that movie, I mean, I don't think there's been a bigger female movie star in 20 years than she was after Pretty Woman. Who else?
Well, she made a movie before that called Steel Magnolias.
Well, and she made Mystic Pizza, too.
Right.
But, I mean, Pretty Woman just...
Sally Field cast her in Pretty Woman.
Really?
I was on an airplane with her, and she said, you ought to look at this woman who I just did a movie with.
Who else? And you had Eddie
Murphy.
Who was, who's still, I don't think...
Chevy Chase.
It seems like, from your experiences, when you hit that level of fame, sometimes you can get pretty weird. You can kind of surround, you end up in a little cocoon almost. You stop having normal human interactions. It can go either way. Some of those people... Every one of them came back to be great. They all had, moments of entourages and stuff, but they've all, as they continued their career, got real. Pausing.
Harrison Ford. But Harrison Ford had already done Star Wars before he did Indiana Jones for us.
Oh, Harrison Ford.
He did Star Wars. We tried to get Tom Selleck. CBS wouldn't let Tom Selleck out of his contract. So we got...
That's the one thing that's a recurring theme. You do need some luck with this stuff, with the casting. Like, I think the Stallone Beverly Hills Cop thing is a perfect example, because that's probably Eddie's... I mean, I think that's still the number one grossing comedy ever made. Or it might still be at the top, even 25 years later.
Often I learned this at Disney when I was agonizing over where to put a hotel, whether it was in Site A or Site B, and the ex-CEO... I was talking to him, and Frank Wells, what do I do? Where do I put it? And he said, this guy, Card Walker, who had preceded me, said, sometimes there are two right answers. They don't have to be right and wrong. If you get the material right and the idea for the movie is right, it's a different movie with a different cast, but it could also be a good movie. It's just different.
Right. All right. Well, you're going to have to come back because we didn't even get to the 2002. No, you have a million more stories. We didn't even get to the 2002 Angels.
Oh, that was good.
We'll save that for the next time.
Okay.
Because you're the only person I know who was actually, in the box as the owner of a team that they kept showing and during this.
The only thing I can tell you, and I know I'm out of time too.
You're out of time.
Is at the end. You don't want to hear this?
No, it's quickly.
At the end of the game, my friend John Angelo, who's also in this book, was in the box for that final game where we beat San Francisco. And he said, how do I get on television? I want to be on television. They always shoot the box. And John Travolta was at the game with me. So I said, just come here and stand next to John Travolta. And John Travolta was kind of standing in the back, having a Coke. I said, John, come out here. We're getting to the end of the game. I said, John, you're an actor. When we win, I want you to get excited. Because then I know they'll shoot the owner's box.
Yeah, do this for me.
And John, you stand there. So we win, and Travolta went insane. He acted like it was VJ Day.
Yeah.
And he jumped up and down, and he hugged me, and he kissed me, and he went crazy. And then the game ended, and I went down on the field in the river I did, and then I got in the car to go home. It's an hour drive. Every talk radio show said, what's up between Travolta and Eisner? It was hysterical. What is going on between the two of them?
Those guys need a room.
It was hysterical. But it was that game, 2002.
That's funny.
So that was...
All right, so the book is called Working Together. You wrote it with Aaron Cohen. You wrote a nice little thing about how that turned out.
That was another partnership. Yeah, he was great.
It was good. I recommend it. I thought it was great. I hope you write another one.
He, by the way, is one of a couple of Emmys and works for Bob Costas.
Yeah,
with
and
Bob
a Peabody.
Costas. And Peabody.
All right. Thank you for being on the BS Report.
Thank you.
So I get to sign off. Whoa!
Thank you for downloading the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Too much fun.
Check out more podcasts at the iTunes Music Store or at Podcenter at ESPNradio.com.
Peace out.
This concludes another installment of the BS Report. And with all the talk about sports, Bill Simmons neglected to mention this very important final thought. Eat bold with Subway fiery footlong subs. So hot they'll burn the wimp right out of you. Like the intensely delicious new turkey jalapeno melt. A fiery twist on a legendary flavor with bubbly Monterey cheddar and spicy chipotle Southwest sauce. And the backed by popular demand buffalo chicken fiery footlong sub with fire grilled chicken smothered in smoking red hot sauce. Subway fiery footlong subs. They're boldest yet. Subway. Eat fresh.